fighting. I'm like,
right.
Mom, please put your ear on the phone. Mom,
Yeah.
please put your ear on the phone. And, man, all day, man, we're like, Mom, flat against the face. So the first 35 seconds, you're yelling at her.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to
and
get the
then
ground
next
rules.
35 seconds, are, I'm one of 5, 6 that she raised.
Right.
And so the next 3 seconds is her trying to not insult you, but figure out which one of them you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes she thinks you're a perfect stranger. That happens.
Great.
And I had a full conversation, and she said, "No, I'm waiting for my youngest to call." And I was like, "Who do you think this is?" And then she started to laugh. She starts to laugh.
Hi, my name's Leo WT, and you have found your way to the Conversations Podcast. Conversations exist to create spiritually minded conversations about life. We desire to create safe space for dialogue and community. We desire to come together regularly and intentionally to generate conversations about life, belief, and the intersection of the two. Everyone is welcome at the conversation.
And one of the things that I love about you the most is that you are a fantastic storyteller. And Conversations, which is, what we're here for. If you're watching this feed, there's a 125% chance you know what Conversations is. But I'm going to introduce it again, just in case you're unsure. Conversations is the sharing of diverse narratives to find the common threads, the deeper things that pull us together as humans, right? Because I believe when we engage in those sorts of unfettered, spiritually minded conversations, we truly do find that we're more alike than we are different. And one of the reasons that I wanted you to come on Conversations is, first of all, if I haven't made this explicitly clear, you're one of my favorite fucking people. And we could talk about literally anything, and I'm pretty sure I would just want to drop the mic when we were done. I mean, we could talk for 3 hours, like we may or may not have last night. You know what I mean?
Right. About everything.
All the things. Sex toys, drag queens, evangelicalism, speaking in tongues. We hit the gamut.
Nonprofit work.
Work.
Just,
all of the things.
Yes,
it's all the things. So I would love for you to just give sort of a brief introduction to who you are, but I want to kick it off with this story, just so my friends that are watching understand the context. For those of you who don't know Eunice, aka Lulu, Lulu is a friend of mine from when I was living and working in Harlem. And I think it might have been the first interaction that we had together. Lulu came up to me and she said, "Hi, she's like, my name's Lulu. This is Metro Hope. Like, this is what we're doing. Here we are." And then I found out maybe a month or two later, like into our friendship, she told me her internal dialogue when she met me, which was, "Do I have to tell this bitch she's gay?" like that was Lulu's first concern, because I was coming in as a pastoral intern, right? And so Lulu was really concerned that no one had broken the news to me. But rest assured, I had finally realized, after a 5-year-long struggle of just 3 exorcisms, 5 years, 2 colleges, I realized that I was a big old dyke.
Oh, I'm glad. I was so worried because I was like, she's such a cute little dyke.
I was.
Who's gonna tell her? Because I love a cute little dyke.
Oh yeah.
And just out of my own, having had friends that had kind of suffered.
Yep.
Knowing that they later on in conversations with them, I said I wanted to say that, and they said that would have helped.
Right.
Like if someone would have just in loving kind of pulled me aside and be like, you're gay, and that's okay.
Yep, that's what's happening here.
I'm not going to out you. I'm just going to let you know it's okay with me.
Yep.
If you want to have that conversation. I thought it would have been an insult to her, and years later she was like, it would have helped me. Like it would have, and it would have, it sort of helped a lot of the denial. If one person would have said it, it's kind of like an ally, right? Safe space.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to safe space you. I just wanted to put a triangle for myself and be like, girl.
Right from the front, like right from the jump. Like, we don't need pretense here. Gayer than a bucket of wigs.
Yeah. That's the triangle. Be like, tell me it's fine. I don't give a shit.
It's good in true moderation form, which, in case you're watching and you don't know me in person, I have zero moderation. And so in true moderation form, I had bought a tattoo machine to learn how to do permanent makeup. And instead I tattooed myself, which has been wildly successful. But I tattooed a pink triangle on my leg. So in case you're wondering, I just put it right out there from the start. So, but I would love, can you tell our friends that are on the video, just like a brief synopsis of who you are and why we should give a shit that you're talking?
I don't know. The second part I have no answer to, but the first part is I have like a pen name. So my pen name and my pen persona is Lulu Alicea. It's not my legal name anymore, but it's what I like to go under for a few reasons. One is, guys, of like, I have a 9 to 5, and it's in the public sector, and it's at a pretty large nonprofit. And I don't want anything scandalous that I say to get them in trouble. But if you look me up, I'm Eunice Hudak. It's not a big deal. I married a very cute white boy from Pennsylvania. I was born in Puerto Rico. I don't know if I was born in Puerto Rico. I was born in Puerto Rico. Moved to Yonkers in the 80s. I'm the youngest of 5. And I think the important part of a couple of things. One is that I learned the art of storytelling by sitting at the feet of many a Puerto Rican woman telling a story, and realized really young that was a way to sort of get attention, but also relay. My grandmother was illiterate.
Oh, okay.
Didn't read and write.
Okay.
So she loved for us to kind of tell and retell stories, and I realized that was her way of sort of branding us. And my mom was loosely literate. She had gotten pulled out of school in 2nd grade to take care of the kids. She's one of 15, and she taught herself how to read with the Bible. So that sort of shifts how important the gospel became in my life. I was born into a Pentecostal family. My dad had been a minister in Puerto Rico, and then we moved to the state. He had been a minister in Yonkers. They moved back to Puerto Rico, had me, came back here. And he didn't pastor once he was here, but he was always part of the ministry. Yeah. And my mom was always involved in the ministry. And so we were Assemblies of God, Pentecostal. I found out years later that my great aunt on my grandfather's side is one of the premier evangelists in Puerto Rico. She's one of the reasons why Pentecostalism and why evangelical Christianity took hold in Puerto Rico. She was like a door-to-door missionary. And so it's part of my bloodline. And then the other half of my bloodline is very Catholic. I did not grow up Catholic, which is always funny. Yeah. So I've gone to mass and messed it up. And when they're doing like the pray for us, I'm always like, pray for us. I'm always late. I can't do the call and response. I can't do it.
You're just like trying to get it out there before the moment's passed.
I'm trying to get it out there. I've worked in the nonprofit sector, youth development and community engagement probably my entire existence. Since I was in the youth group at 14 and put in charge of a ministry. And I've worked primarily in the South Bronx, the Bronx, Harlem. Now I work for New York City public high schools, all of the high schools in New York public schools. Dang. So lots of New York City public students working around community relation, parent engagement, all that stuff.
For sure.
And then I moonlight as a writer and as a storyteller. I really think of myself, I don't even like the term writer. I really like storyteller. So I've had some plays produced off Broadway. My husband and I wrote a short film. We did a video that we can talk about later. So I just like being a content creator, storyteller. Any way I can find a way to tell a story, I try to do that. And I find that, and I have a TEDx about just that. How, you just create space.
I posted that on the conversations page this week. And I think, I don't know if it was in the transcript from that video or in a conversation that I read or a bio of yours somewhere online, because I just stalked you all week to prep for this. But I saw somewhere that you said, I try to tell a story every day. And I think that sums up who you are.
Story every day. My poor husband, he's like, I've heard this one. I'm like, wait, did them tell you a story that goes with this? It's actually been a great vehicle for, I think my generation, I'm the younger of a lot, I'm younger by a lot. I tell my people about my sisters and they get very mad at me. They're like, it's not that much, but I am. I'm technically a generation behind them. They're all 10 years and above. Right. And so my kind of generation, we started marrying non-Latino, my nephew married a lovely white woman and I married a white man. And I find that it's a great way to sort of talk about traditions and to tell a story so they can kind of, like, especially if they didn't meet my grandmother, who was this great matriarch who kind of created the climate and culture of my family. Like why we function the way we function. And so it's great for me to sort of always tell them a story. And my nephew's wife has often said, I appreciate Lulu because she gives a context to things and then I get it. And I can see myself in there. She then connected to, it's a way that she's very Italian, but then she'll see sort of, she's like, oh, we do that. We just call it. And so that's, I think, why people should tell stories every day, because I think it creates this.
It creates that safe space and common ground.
Oh, and it creates you saying, oh, I see myself there now. I mean, exactly. The Bible's a book of stories. I mean, we're all human nature. The story is just
Yeah.
It's just part of human. It's what separates us from the animals.
Exactly.
So,
It's what humans do. I mean, some days the line between human and animal seems very thin.
it can't be based on nurturing or caring or any of that stuff, because animals do all that stuff, sometimes they do it better.
Yep.
But our need to have a story to tell.
Yeah.
And in indigenous, obviously brown indigenous cultures,
Yeah.
talk story is very big amongst in like that time of talk story where you come around a fire or you come around, and we do it. And my sisters talk about that often, that my nephews are very used to that. So they know when we're together. Eventually the TV never turned. My husband says that. He's like, when you guys, TV's never on.
Yeah.
Computer, everything shuts down.
Yep.
Because it all started. And they know it's starting.
Yep.
Remember the time? Remember
Yes.
that time that you remember it kind of just, you feel it kind of swirling around.
Yep.
And, I mean, you told the story of me telling you that later, but it was really when you were brave enough to invite me to a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And to tell me, I just wanted you to know I'm a lesbian. And I said, hey, kid, I knew that.
I see you. Tell me something else that's not obvious.
But I thought, wow, the bravado, the bravery of this kid finally saying it, and knowing the implication that had for the weight of the world on you, and at the time that the ministers that we were all friends of, and you felt you were putting them in a precarious situation.
Yeah, I did.
You just felt so much pressure.
Yeah.
And I think that was great that you did
had to happen. And there was so much freedom that came from telling my story. And I think that's really the heart of why I wanted to have you on here tonight, because Conversations is an intentionally spiritually minded space. But the word spiritual is sometimes misunderstood because it's either hardline, praying the rosary, speaking in tongues like that, or it's like, bro, I just took some peyote and went to yoga class, right? But the point of Conversations is that, like, I really believe that a lot of the world, a lot of the narratives in the world and the major religions in the world, there are underlying common threads, and we're just speaking different dialects. And I would love to hear your dialect and what you have to say about being a Latina, right? Who grew up in a like completely Latino culture, like this is who you are, right? But then you also grew up in that evangelical Pentecostal culture. And I would love to hear about your journey to where you are now, because I know that there's people that are watching right now. I'm interacting with them in the comments, and they're watching and they're saying, like, I believe in some of this stuff, but like some of this hatred that's been perpetuated, and the cult of Christian nationalism, and the rise of Donald Trump, and the outright disenfranchisement of Black and brown people, and the hatred towards LGBTQ people, like they can't vibe with that. And so I know personally that you have come from a place, like I put in the title, you've had this like exodus from evangelicalism. And so I really want to hear like part of that story, like what was one of the first light bulb moments where you're like, I've got to grow? Like, maybe I don't know how, but I've got to grow.
So a little context, because I'm also a teacher. My husband always says, you're always teaching. Because that was my first degree was in teaching, right? And a good teacher is a good storyteller. And I love history. So a little context, one of the reasons why Pentecostalism tends to hold with communities of color, disenfranchised communities, and poorer communities, non-mainstream communities. So if you think about it, it took hold in Puerto Rico, it's taken hold in the Philippines, it took hold in Brazil, in the favelas of Brazil. It took hold in the South, in the American South. If you ever want to read a good book, Zora Neale Hurston was a cultural anthropologist before she was a fictional writer.
Okay.
And one of the things that she did was she toured the South, and she said she toured with a pistol and a stack of bills, because she would pay for stories. Yeah. For stories for Black people, and the church, which she did not grow up in. Right. She rejected very early on. She studied the church the way one would study anything else. And she studied the Pentecostal church. And she talked about call and response and the catching of the spirit, and how close that is to indigenous. Yes. Cultures. Yeah. So right there's a sort of, and I think that was one of the first times that I got offended, was I was in college reading Zora Neale Hurston. I had just been struck in the face at 18 with Zora Neale Hurston. And I read an essay, and she talks about the call and response. And I remember feeling the familiarity. and being like, but that's the spirit. And then her, you know, as a cultural anthropologist, just writing out, you see that in the talk story of the indigenous, you see it in the shaman, you see it in, and she's pulling in all these places where brown people get possessed by something otherworldly.
Right.
And that possession leads you to a higher plane of consciousness.
Yeah.
And how it makes sense for Pentecostalism, but it can get rejected by Main Street evangelicals, right?
Yeah.
And so there starts to be a divide between, for us, the word was rajatabla. And rajatabla means, I told my husband that rajatabla means, it translates to splitting a tablet.
Okay.
But what it means was strictness. And I remember there being like, my mother being like, oh, we're not those Pentecostals. And the step towards a wider church, a wider, sort of more culturally acceptable. So you didn't dress differently, you didn't look like a Mennonite, but you also got more modern. And so it had more structure, the services. So rather than the 3 hours where the Spirit came, all that felt like it was suddenly wasteful, but the Spirit could have order. Once that shift started to happen, and part of your identity starts to go, because talk story and dancing and singing, that is very much part of Puerto Rican culture.
Yeah.
Once that shift happens, the church became less Puerto Rican for me.
Right.
And that was, and I was told that was spiritual maturity, and that was hard. That was really hard. That was the first time where I was like, wait a minute. Some things are starting to, you know, you get that little bit of college in you. Some things are starting to make parallels. And then, you know, in the soap opera that can be a small church, as you know.
Oh God,
passions run very high and maturity runs very low, and backstabbing, and, you know, my own aunt kind of rejected me because of, you know, a spiritual, a leadership coup. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So I'm like, you know, again, blaming the Latino and not blaming the way religion works. I then kind of church hopped. And then I spent, I think, like 6 or 7 years in a very wealthy white church. I mean, celebrities going to the church, the whole thing. And it was awful.
Yeah.
Like, it was a lot of cognitive dissonance going on there for me. Like, I had to justify every single time I was there.
Yeah.
And then from there, the last bounce was Metro, where I told you, if it doesn't work out in this place, where I really believe in the integrity of the leaders, I really believe in their vision.
Yeah.
I really think they're trying.
Yeah, I mean, they're a multicultural community of social workers, right? Like, you can't.
It was all social, everybody, and we used to even joke around. I mean, I hope if she can watch, Carrie Cook is another person you should try to get on.
Yeah, I should.
Carrie, because Carrie is she's an advocate for a non-traditional abilities, right? She's deaf. She's a Black deaf woman.
Yes.
And so she does a really good job at looking at the gospel through that.
Yes.
So if you look her up, if you can get her on.
God, I love her so much.
And Carrie would always be like, that's so Metro, right?
Exactly.
Because it was two social workers. So everything was, and I remember saying out loud, if it's not here,
it's not anywhere.
It's not anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think I ever said this to you. I know I didn't say it. Maybe I was saving it for this moment. In that time, because of my work, you work in nonprofit, and you work in New York City, you work with brown people, I began to butt up against lots of queer folk across all spectrums.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe how much acceptance is part of their conversation, how much love is part, how much healing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, finally, like I said, the chasm between what the church thinks it's believing and what it's actually practicing, and people that are actively, that chasm became too vast for me.
Yeah.
Where I broke bread with people and looked them in the eye and loved them very deeply. And the church was telling me, you can love them, but they have to change. Yeah. And I could never marry that again. No. And I couldn't marry that I was learning more about myself and more about the world and how people worked with folks that were technically the sinners, right?
Yeah.
With folks who were sexually promiscuous, HIV positive. I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm saying that's what the church had labeled.
That's what the church is saying.
And here I am hanging out with them. And in the same way Jesus did it, I was learning just loads about the world, about the way the world really worked. About things aren't really what they seem. And you have to scratch a little under the surface. And
they're non-binary. Oh,
I mean, a lot of things are like that. And I started to like myself a lot more. I liked who I became when I let go of all of these notions that I had grabbed onto, but never quite fit.
Right. Well, it's like that thing. It's like, what are you taught to believe versus what do you believe? Like, what were you taught to know versus what his experience as the greatest teacher taught you? You know what I mean? And you can't go back once you've experienced something. Like, you can wrestle with the rightness or wrongness of it, if you believe in those words. You can wrestle with the okayness or not okayness of it for you, but you can't wrestle with it if it happened. Like, that was the story for me. I was like, yo, I'm gay. And then there were a couple of years where I wrestled with how does that play out? While having a physical relationship with my girlfriend, because women are beautiful. And so that was another level of confusion. But like, I came to the point where I was like, I don't know if it's okay or not, or what I do with this, but whether I am or am not gay. I was actually at the Palisades Mall, which is right outside of where I went to college at Nyack. And I had just come out of an exorcism, fresh off the exorcism. And I went, that was a real story. 3 exorcisms here. They either failed or they were really effective, and I'm a fucking man now. I don't know which. Jury's still out. But after the 3rd exorcism, I went to the mall with my friend to pick up a paycheck. And I'll never forget it. I was standing across from Panda Express, and it was like Bath and Body Works right there. And I was like on the escalator, and I fresh out the exorcism, right? And this girl walks by, and I went like this. No forethought, completely instinctual. And in my head, I was like, that's it. Like, I didn't choose that reaction. Now I can choose how I react to it, which was another thing that I worked through in my own life. But I knew at that point it existed. And so it sounds like you're saying, like, you had this experience with queer people because we're fabulous and we're changing the world one day at a time. But you couldn't turn back from what you saw, the humanity that you saw in your queer friends.
And the common sense. So I give much credit to, and I've mentioned her very often, my very good friend Kathy, who is, she will tell you herself, dyke of all dykes.
Dyke of all dykes.
She says, I always wear 10 sensible shoes and a nice sweater vest. Like, she's she just hits it out of the ballpark with that story every time.
Yep.
And we talked about it one time. We were just having dinner and she was very honest about how can you be Christian and think these things? And I said, well, because it's wrong. And she's like, because you're thinking about what I'm doing in the bedroom. You know what? It's not your business. And I was like, you're right. It is none of my business. It's not anybody's business. She goes, that's all you're thinking about.
Yeah.
That's all you're thinking about. You're thinking about what I'm doing in my bedroom. And that, my dear, is none of your business. She goes,
that's just creepy.
According to her, she's like, if I want to drink Prosecco in bed and eat cookies, that's my business, girl, not yours. She made, of course, a great fabulous gay joke about it.
Right.
But I was like, so she's like, stop the thought right there.
Right.
And you don't really have much argument after that.
No, you don't.
And I was like, So that was like one of my first many hugs, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember when it just had started with non-gender conforming bathrooms, and she said, without missing a beat, is your bathroom at home gender specific?
Oh, snap.
She goes, it's a toilet.
Yeah, it's a shitter.
Excrement has no gender.
No,
she was just like, you can't look at excrement and be
There's a t-shirt right there. Excrement has no gender.
Has no gender, right? She's like, she goes, all piss is yellow unless it's red, and then you need to call the doctor.
Yeah, then you gotta call the doctor.
She was just really funny. And so she does that. She just like, and then people tend to like, and she's like, I mean, you first have to argue the logic of it, the truth of it, right? The truth is, excrement doesn't really have a gender. Is your bathroom at home gender specific? Like, oh, there's a door. So I'll put a door.
Right.
Like, she kind of gets you all bound up.
Yep.
So the more that kept happening, the more that also personal life thing. I moved out of my house. I had an apartment on my own. The more I kind of started taking those big steps.
Yeah.
The more I was like, I'm going to think for myself.
Yep.
And this this dissonance, it's now, it went from being like a buzz to like, it's now like a lot of noise in my head that I can't, that any scripture that comes to mind, and seeing pastors like backpedal or forward, and I just couldn't vibe with that anymore. So I know you call it the Exodus. I like to call it Dorothy, right? I find pay no attention to the man behind the. I paid attention to the man behind the curtain. Yeah. And I said, there's a lot of things behind that curtain. Yeah. That are painted up to look really pretty.
Right.
And we don't have the corner market on it.
No, and behind the curtain, there's homophobia, there's transphobia, there's colonialism, there's white supremacy, there's patriarchy, there's so many things. There's the Crusades, there is people using the Bible to justify slavery. Like all of those things are there if you look.
And it's there, right? And the other thing I think, that I think the thing that I always struggled with, though, is that I could sit here also and tell you about real, genuine moments where someone texted me and said, I'm praying for you, and it mattered, you know, or my family recently, about 2 years ago, we had tremendous loss, and people just really reaching out, people from the church, and saying, we're praying for you. We know and that really helping. It really takes you back to a place of real, genuine love and concern. And that's and we talked about that, right? That's where any person that's leaving the church, especially if you're a person of color, that your family was often in the church as well, you're leaving a lot. Everything. You're leaving behind. I have a colleague. He's my work husband, and he's fabulous Black man from the South Bronx, and he grew up Black Pentecostal. But it's parallel. He said, other than the Spanish, it's parallel. Yeah. And he too is in exile. He walked away and took his kids with him and his wife, you know, and so he and I are often in other circles with other people of color that work with us, 2 of which are ministers, 1 of which goes to, and so it's hard because they're talking something and we can get in on the conversation.
Yes, yeah.
And then there's a line where he and I then go a little too far.
Yes, yeah. Well, you have the language.
I'll give you the story. So it was around Easter, and we sit in an open office. God forbid anyone has office space anymore. Everyone's in an open space. And right on the other side of us is a gentleman who's about like 9 feet tall, and he is a minister in Harlem as well.
Not at all terrifying.
He happens to know Jose Humphreys very well, all that. He knew who I was when he's like, I know who you are. So ironically, because nonprofit brown people in New York City, we all know each other.
Yeah.
And so he was on the other side, and we were in our row, and I now don't have a track of the Christian calendar anymore because I don't go to church. So it was Easter weekend, but I could not put it together. Also, what is it, descarriado in Spanish, which means discarded. So if you say you're descarriado, so I am the prodigal son, I'm discarded, it's fine. And so we were trying to figure out, was it this Sunday? Is it next Sunday? Do you have a calendar? Is it Advent? And I'm like, when is zombie Jesus? When does it happen? And like, back from the dead, zombie Jesus. And we're going in. Like,
zombie Jesus, yeah.
He's calling him zombie Jesus, and I'm like, back from the dead Jesus, and I'm like, do you think zombie Jesus like has gray skin? And from across the other side, you hear Greg go, all right, guys, that's enough.
Like, we crossed the line.
He had listened to us for about 10 minutes, and then he was like, you know damn well that Easter's this Sunday, stop calling him zombie Jesus, and let's move on. We all thought that was really funny, because I happen to work in a row. I happen to be the only row in my job where everyone is brown. So that row, we were laughing. Yeah. But we knew that white folks would be like, well, he is zombie Jesus. Like, no, that's a little harsh, not funny.
Right.
And then we knew that really religious folks, like for example, the lady at the front desk is Jehovah's Witness, she would have been like, like she would have been up in arms.
Yeah.
So so he and I are always in the periphery of, we're exiled. And so we don't take any of that stuff seriously. However he feels, we've never really talked about it, but we often reminisce about it and how hard it is for him to sort of have raised his children to not go to church and to believe whatever they want and to sort of be good people. But when he reintroduces them to church, and their family from church, the conversation. And he's like, it's so for us, it's double. We leave two things behind.
Yeah.
We leave behind the familial feeling of church, and we leave behind our families.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah.
And so it's, I mean, I don't know how it is for white folk, but for us, it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really, it's, you know, there's just something missing. And I'm lucky now that for the majority, I'm one of 5 siblings, and I think only one of us still goes to church. So all of us are sinners and people, which is great for us, because we can all, but we have to be careful. But it's great for us because we're all outcasts.
Yep.
Together.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think I've gone the farthest out, but we're all pretty.
Bye.
Yeah, and you know, you have to be respectful of your mom, and there's a lot of politicking that happens. There is.
And there's people who I would never want to hurt. And there was, for me, I think it's funny because when you talk about your experience with the church, like, to me, you've come out. You know what I mean? You might be married to a man, but in a lot of ways, you understand the nuances of coming out in a way that not very many straight people could understand. There's actually a TED talk by a non-binary human who I believe his name is Ash, if I remember correctly. But they gave a TED talk about how a closet is just a hard conversation, to draw a little bit of a parallel, because people are like, oh, you know, gay people are so other, but you understand what it's like because you were not only moving, traveling in concentric circles outward from the center when it came to your theology, you're traveling in concentric circles outward from your family, and then from your culture of church, right? And so, like, I'm white, but for me, my biggest cultural identity, like, I am culturally evangelical in the way that people are culturally Jewish or culturally Catholic. And so, like, I don't know where I'm from. My parents said like, asked them where I'm from. They're like, you're white. And I was like, that's not a place. You know, you can go back to the land of white, to quote my friend Justin, who's on here. But like, for me,
I'm gonna say it's Norway. I'm gonna go with Norway.
You go with Norway.
That feels the whitest. That feels the whitest.
I'll be a Viking. I mean, I don't know. It seems cool.
That feels the whitest. Like, they had the really white blonde hair. Mm-hmm. Maybe like Iceland. I just think that feels the whitest. Yeah. I love Robin, so I can mess with Iceland too. So,
I love it.
But I feel like that might be the most.
Yeah. And so my Viking self, my Nordic self, left the conservative evangelical church, and for me, part of that process of leaving the church was like, you can take. Like, I can give up a lot of things to be me, right? And I had reconciled, strained relationships with the family. I had reconciled getting kicked out of college. Like, I had reconciled so many things, but for me, there was something that I could not give up on. And so I sat down with my good friend in her office, my friend who was a dean at the time, and really was one of 2 people that actually made sure I could graduate. Working to get her on the podcast, I'll just weep like a little baby the whole time, which is okay because crying.
You might need a co-moderator.
I might need a co-moderator. You are correct, or like no whiskey, one or the other. You know what I mean? But she said, "What are your non-negotiables?" Right? And I actually did this experiment on the conversations page a couple of weeks back, and I said, "Okay, so we're coming together and we're all vibing, right? But we've not once talked about like a core theology, and we're not going to, because not everybody in the group is a theist. But what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are the core things that people would come back to?" And I made a list of it, and I used it to come up with our values for conversations. But for me, my personal non-negotiables were like working towards creating shalom, the idea of comprehensive, holistic peace in the world, right? Not waiting for someone else to do it, but getting off my own ass and doing it and encouraging others to do so. And then also just complete and true and total and unyielding and unconditional love. Like, those were my non-negotiables. And those are the 2 things that you will never disenfranchise me from. You cannot shake me from those things. Right. And so in this journey, kind of from the church, this nonlinear thing, because it is nonlinear. Like, you're like, ah, shit, and then you dip a little bit back, and then you have a dream that the rapture has happened, and you just came out of the bathroom and no one's home, and you got all these things. But what would you say? Talk to me about kind of like where you are now and what you do believe in and what your non-negotiables are, because to me, when I speak to you, you're as Lulu, if not more, than I ever saw in person. And there's a whole lot of Lulu. There's always been a whole lot of Lulu.
I always say that I'm intense for the other side now.
Yeah.
I've always been intense. And they liked, I'm one of those people that you like me when I'm on your side.
Right.
But you're like, shit, if she crosses over to the other side, she's enemy number one.
That is such a Latina thing.
Right. That's what I always tell my husband this, and he says, you're right. I was like, I am not. Two things I told my husband, you'll appreciate. Number one is I'm nice until I'm not nice.
Right.
And then that's it. That's the end of it. That she's been put away. She's never coming out again.
She's on the shelf.
And the second thing I tell my husband, and this is just to tell my husband, I said to him, listen, when I first met him, I said, listen, I flirt with everybody. Men, women, non-binary, trans, top, bottoms. I flirt with everybody because for me, flirting is not sexual.
Right.
It is about energy and sort of finding the frequency of the other person and making them feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
He didn't believe me. And then we were someplace and there was a girl there and I was like, hey, sweetheart, can you just, and she kind of giggled. He's like, you do flirt with everybody. Like, I made her feel good about herself. What does that have to do with anything?
Right. Like, you're still my bitch. Calm down. You're still my bitch.
But like, I don't want to sleep with her. I just want her to feel good. And then in the meantime, she's going to get me extra sauce for my burger. It's
like missionary flirting.
It is totally. No, because I just think not everything is sex. That actually came from the church. That everything was sex comes from the church.
Right.
That everything is the only thing that sex is about sex. Everything else is about everything else.
Yeah.
So once you kind of divorce that the actual act of whatever you define as sex is sex. Everything else is for the living. Like everything else is for everybody else. Then you're okay. Yeah. So my non-negotiables are I'm going to try to without cursing.
You can curse if you want.
I know this is so antithetical to the church. I don't believe in a redemption arc for everyone.
Okay.
And so that gives me permission to remove myself from people that are just not looking out for my best interest for whatever reason. Maybe they're reckless because they're hurt. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I got to be in there with them.
Right. Yeah. Right? You don't have to stay.
And I don't have to stay. And if they are going to get help, and even if they get help, I don't have to trudge through those waters again.
Right.
So because I don't believe in a redemption arc, sometimes it is what it is.
Right.
That's as good as it gets.
Right.
That's as coherent as that person's going to be.
Yeah.
It's not that I give up on people, but it's not my job to move them, to save them, my job is to create a really safe space for them and for me.
Yep.
Some people have a little bit more priority when it comes to safety for me.
Yeah.
Based on who I love, based on my own misgivings about people. And then I move on.
Right.
I worked in social work for a little while, obviously, because we were at Metro, so everybody.
Yep. All of us social workers.
I worked for therapeutic foster boarding homes. So I worked for kids in foster care that were a step above from generic foster care. They had been chronic or they had been introduced to trauma. Okay. And I had a boss and she was mean and scary, British woman.
Okay.
Frightening little thing. And she always told me, I'm not gonna do a British accent because I don't want, but she always told me, she used to ask me, what's your number one priority when you're working with us?
Uh-huh.
And I used to always be like, what's your name? And she used to point at people, what's the number one priority? And then she would land on it. She goes, it's not to make people feel loved. It's to make people feel safe.
Right. Yeah.
Love is fickle.
Yeah. And safety is bottom tier. If you're talking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like if you can't achieve safety, it's very hard to move up the rungs towards self-actualization.
And I don't have to like you to keep you safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I owe people.
Yes.
So yours is unconditional love and mine is unconditional safety.
Yeah.
I may never like you. I may never even love you.
Right.
But I promise that I'm going to do my best to make sure that I keep you safe. And if I've done any harm, right? It's like, harm. It's my job to restore that. That's on me. The sorry is on me. I'm sorry you feel that way, but the sorry is on me. Right. What can I learn is on me. Right. So I think those are like my two non-negotiables. Really, there's no redemption arc for everybody.
Yeah, you giving up on that false notion. Just setting that free, because like I think that leads to codependency, and that leads to stagnancy, and that leads to abusive and toxic situations. You know what I mean?
And I don't believe in the myth. There's a great article from the New York Times about the myth of closure and the myth of forgiveness. It's a myth. That the brain doesn't need it in the way that we think it does.
Right.
That we don't have to like sit down from the first person and cry with them, that you can just make up in your mind, all right,
I'm done.
I'm not going to mess with them anymore. And that's that. And they can go on their merry way.
Right.
And so I totally believe in that. So there's no redemption arc. And the second is that my job is to keep people, I mean, I work with young people. So my utmost job is always to keep them safe. Right. But I realize that I have to do that with adults. Yeah. That I have to do that to my husband. That at the very end of the day, we could be like so angry with one another, but I won't do anything that'll injure him, that'll put him in a space where he's not safe. Because I don't know, you don't always feel like you love him. Right. So I can't rely on that. So there has to be a baseline that's out of my control. And the baseline that's out of my control is people's safety.
I like that idea.
Safety, emotional safety. When people are like, this is a safe space, what does that really mean?
Right, fleshing that out.
Right, does it mean that you don't want me to talk, that you want me to lower my voice? Right. I have a nephew who has autism, and he's pretty severe on the spectrum. And so we've learned that safety can be shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
sometimes you're loud.
Yeah,
sometimes he likes to play songs, and he loves Night at the Museum. And one of his favorite songs is September. And he'll start to play it, and we all start to sing. We're like, do you remember? And he'll pause and just look at us like, nobody.
I didn't want to hear you, bitch.
Right. I'm sorry. Are you Earth, Wind, and Fire? Shut up. But he doesn't say it. He just pauses the song and looks at us like. And then, but then 2 minutes later, he'll look at us for us to sing. So you got to take his cue, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what I said. Some people have my utmost attention. So because of that, I've become hyper aware that sometimes if there's another child in the room that may not be typical, I'm like, look, I know what's going on. Turn that TV off. Shut those lights down. Shut up.
Yep.
And
we can create that.
Oh, they have to learn. They don't have to learn.
No, they do not.
You have to learn.
Yeah.
That sometimes you need to adjust yourself.
You have to learn that you're not the center. You're not always the center. Stop centering yourself. You're not the fucking sun. Like sometimes a lot of life is about decentering and looking out for the periphery.
Right. So if I were still a follower of Christ, and I gotta say, I think Jesus is a pretty cool dude.
Yeah, historical Jesus is chill.
If just like, that proof, like 100% proof, just look at the red words.
Right.
Pretty cool dude.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's like, he was talking about love. And I think he was talking about safety. I think he was talking about, everyone's like, love thy neighbor, you love yourself. Well, some people don't love themselves a lot. There's a lot there. Like you gotta do a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I think he was a lot about you have to work on yourself because that's what you're responsible for. People like to be self-centered until they have to do work.
Yes.
And then it's someone else's problem.
There is so much of this ambiguous amalgam that's known as spirituality. There's so much of it that is we just spend so much time preaching it that we forget to take it in. And I think some of the heart of spirituality, like I really love the verse in Proverbs where it says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Because, some fuckers like Josh Harris, I kiss dating goodbye, right? This purity culture movement, they bastardized that verse. And they said, don't touch your wee-wee or other people's or you're going to hell.
Don't touch your hoo-ha. They can't even say it.
Don't touch your hoo-ha. They're so afraid of it. They can't say the word, right? Do not make purple. Boys are blue and girls are red and don't make purple, right? We can't even talk about actual physical sex, right? But this purity culture movement bastardized that verse. It just chopped it off at the knees. And I think the wisdom from that set of words, from that passage, from that person, because it was a person who wrote it, the wisdom in that is, who are you? And guard that ferociously like a chihuahua when someone walks into their house, right? I had this crazy dog named Rio, and I swear to God, like 2 pounds, and I'm pretty sure he could have eaten my eyeballs out if he wanted.
Oh yeah, my friend had chihuahuas, vicious.
Yeah, exactly.
They're very territorial. Yeah.
Guard yourself like that, right? My friend Pam, who was on a couple weeks ago, I actually think she might be watching right now. My friend Pam said, she had this great quote, and I'll never forget it. She said, I was born perfect, and then I was handed to a human. And so a lot of her journey, her circular, concentric, nonlinear journey forward to this amazing badass woman that she is, was realizing who she was and uncovering those layers. And it's like people forget that. And we change the meaning and we put the focus out there and we take away that culture and we twist this verse and we change that translation so that we don't have to do any of the real work on ourselves.
No. Whoa. And I think that, that was good, son.
I do what I
Thank
can.
you for coming to my TED Talk. You have to.
But,
if you ever do a TED Talk, by the way, you got to stay on the red circle.
I want to do one so bad. There's a life goal.
Yeah, but there's like a red circle.
It's a thing.
And you have to stay in the red circle.
All right, good to know.
And you don't introduce yourself. I won't give away the secret, but you can't introduce yourself. You just start talking. There's like all these rules that you have.
All right.
One of them is to stay on the red circle, though. That's a big. It's a thing. They get you a red circle, and you gotta stay in the red circle.
Putting it on my brain.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just in thinking back earlier, you had said that like I had a coming out story. I don't want to appropriate gay culture because it is brutal.
Right. Right. And I appreciate that.
To come out.
Yeah.
And then you did it again as coming out as trans, where I think that's some people get on the gay bus and then they get on the trans bus and like, I'm not making that transfer. I'm not.
Yeah, no.
I can't go that. I can't do that.
I'm a glutton for coming out. I was like, that was so fun the first time. Let's do it again.
Let's totally do it again. And I don't try to. But if life is like one thing that maybe a shadow of another thing, I do understand the importance of, and I don't know how it's going to play out in my life. Like I always say, I'm an audience member in my own life.
Yeah.
Every and and it's similar for you. Every 3 years, my life looks completely different.
Oh heck yeah.
So 3 years ago, I wasn't a homeowner, and I wasn't in a pandemic, and I wasn't proclaiming my non-religiousness.
Right.
So so I am certainly a bystander in my own life.
Yeah.
But I do think that I go to like DragCon a lot, and I go to drag clubs, and when I see young people of color, when I see young Puerto Rican kids and young people of color, Black and brown kids that are coming out, I just wonder what would a space look like where they get all that stuff that they would get on Sunday mornings.
Yes.
Or all the stuff I always go for Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday is the outfit, the family outing.
It's the thing, man.
It's the whole thing.
It's the big show.
It's the big show. It's the glove and the hat and the raincoat for me. And I hate it because I'm also a tomboy.
Right.
But it's still, although my husband's like, you can put on, I was like, I will put on a nice boot every now and again. Don't fuck with me. But I certainly, I just think about, because for example, in DragCon, RuPaul, I don't know if they do it in LA, but in New York, they do a Sunday morning service. And technically, he brings in a choir.
Okay.
And he kind of does a motivational speech, but they do like a worship service.
Yeah.
And it's packed.
Yeah.
It's packed to the gills.
Absolutely.
So, imagine kids in drag still being able to sing the songs that make you feel good and connect to something in a higher plane. Yeah. And I always think, man, that feels really good. They feel really safe there.
Yeah,
imagine
that's the thing.
Going in drag.
Yeah.
To sing in a choir. And being able to sing like, I'll Fly Away or His Eyes on the Sparrow or whatever jumpy, clappy song we all love.
Yeah, yeah.
And have other people know the songs and the claps and the syncopation and the tambourine. And
with other people who get the culture, like they know what's coming next and you can vibe in that moment together, but as your full authentic self.
Yeah, because I think that, and I have been to some really great drag shows that take you to church.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think sometimes there's kids that grew up in the church.
Yeah.
Myself included for a little while, where I didn't know what to do at a drag club because I hadn't gone. I didn't know you tip them. You tip them with your mouth. You have your teeth in the crotch. Because the father was like, "Oh my God, this is also inappropriate."
It's a lot. It's a lot. But sex is sex, and that is that.
Right. Or like the first time my girlfriends were like, "Oh, we're going to a strip club." And I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "It's really good. And the girls are hot." I'm like, "Shit, that's true.
Yeah.
So why not do it?"
Yeah.
And then, flash forward to me getting married and my husband's friends trying to, I don't know what they were trying to do. They're like, "Oh, we're going to take them to a strip club." And I was like, "And you make sure that you take 20s and tip those girls well because they're all dental technicians."
Sex work is work. Stripping is work. Exotic dancing is
work.
work.
Have kids at home and do not.
Yes.
And get a lap dance and you do not touch that girl and you make sure you have consent. And they were like, "She just took all the fun out of it." I was like, "Oh, so now it's not fun because it's not risky." I'm just telling you, I don't have a problem with it. It's just you gotta tip them well.
Well, that's what.
Well, but they're really nice. And the last time I went, they put their robes on and we got comped some wings. So
Yo, that's what church does though. Churches were afraid, and this is another tangent, right? We could go off on this, but church was afraid that if people were okay with sex and empowered in their sexuality and embracing themselves in that manner, that they wouldn't need God as much. There's a book I'm reading right now called Shameless: The Sexual Revolution by Nadia Bolz-Weber, who is she's like a crusty punk Lutheran. She's the sarcastic Lutheran. She started a church in Denver called Church for All Saints and Sinners, and she's since moved on to be just full-time writing. But she wrote this book about sexual reclamation and reformation for people who have come from the church. And she said she asked her boyfriend, she got divorced, and then she has this boyfriend, and they had sex before they were married, and she was kind of talking to him like pillow talk, and she was like, she was like, why do you think that the church is so against sex? And the boyfriend said like, oh, I just assumed that they realized how powerful it was and that people wouldn't need God as much if they had sex. And I was like, oh, snap.
And you don't have as much to feel guilty about.
Right. Yeah. Right? There's no guilt, right?
Because you remove this is the thing though, and we talked about, like I told you this, once I started watching porn or whatever, I was like, this is it. This is the escándalo you were taking me out of. The girl with the fake boobs and fake lip. There is nothing about this that is attractive,
not cute,
or B, that I even like. This is so like heteronormative white man. Like there is nothing here.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Like I've seen episodes of the L Word that are hotter than this. I don't know what we're looking at. Not all episodes of the L Word, it's not great. But I think that like Sense8 did a better orgy. I don't know what I'm looking at.
Right? Sense8 was amazing.
The Wachowskis, right? The Wachowskis.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what you confuse it. So I do think that like the church being a controlling trope is what everybody hinges on. I think the unfortunate thing in the community of color, the church was a salvation for a lot of people, myself included. Right? I grew up in a town that was a city that was deeply segregated. It still is. Right. And I was in an advanced program. I look white, but I'm not white. My hair certainly doesn't come off as a white girl. Right. I wasn't a white girl. Right. And my sanctuary was that I had the missionettes, and then I had church, and then I had church on Sundays, and those were my friends, and those were my cousins. And so when they picked on me in school or when I was left out, the answer was, but those aren't your friends. They're not going to heaven. This is my place. Right. Those are not your friends. They don't know Jesus. Those are not your friends. They don't speak your language. Those are not right. Because I also went to church in Spanish. So that was the language of God. And so they don't understand you. And so that's okay. And the youth group was, these are your people. Right. It's God's will. We're together. We're praying together. We do life together. And so in so many ways that saved my life. Yeah. Where I didn't have to worry about what these girls thought of me. I didn't have to care that I didn't look like them. I had a space. Right. And then, the more you get involved in ministry, I was there Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Oh God, every day. Set. My whole social circle was set. Yeah. And the kids in my church, they were beautiful and they were popular. And we all went to different high schools, so it didn't matter. Right. We all really loved each other. Half of them were related to me. Half of them were people I grew up with. Half of them were new. Right. I was really popular. Yeah. Yeah. Which I hated. I was super popular in church, but still all of that. And we went to, and there were things that I got to do that other kids didn't got to do. I got to go to spiritual retreats. I got to travel. I got to, I never did the missionary thing because brown people don't go to save other brown people, but because we don't need to. But I did go to we would drive to Delaware. We would have our, once a season kind of youth thing. Like a retreat rally thing. Yeah. Oh, wow. Some of God has some big ones, and people don't understand. It's like Thunderdome, man. They throw a party, bro. You're on the prowl. You are seeing Christian kids. So it is high hormones, high hijinks. Yeah. I have many a friend that created a baby there. Yeah. Right? Because it's hotel rooms and then I became the chaperone to those things. So I was the one that was sitting in the hallway with the flashlight, like, get back in your room, right? All of that came through the church. And so when you're a person of color, who the church protected you from so many things, to then realize the church also is hindering you from so many things. Yeah. It's really, really hard to do both. It's really hard. And so going back to my original point, I can only imagine even for the older folks, even for my sister has a friend who grew up in the church and he's now gay. And he says things like, I know I'm wrong, but and I think, oh my God, how wonderful would it feel if he had a space where he didn't have to say that?
Yeah.
Or, we talked about this. Most churches will then take the queer kid and make them the worship leader or the dance leader.
Yeah.
They will just pilfer them for that talent and then get ready to ostracize
and
them,
then carry your cross. Yeah, that's the thorn in your side.
Out, right? The minute they touch a pee-pee, they're out, right?
Done.
Well, in your case, you didn't touch any pee-pees. I get it. But
I didn't touch any pee-pees.
You're like, I am pee-pee free, thank you.
Pee-pee free.
But that heartache.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. What a space where that heartache can be healed. Like you said, that there, that there's people in your life that you've heard them say things, and you're just like, I didn't think I needed to hear that.
Right.
But I did need to hear it.
Yeah.
Other than Joshua Harris, I never know his name. The dickhead that was in charge of Exodus. I don't know his
name.
Oh
God, I don't remember that guy's name. But Exodus International, for those of you who are watching, my literal tens of fans, Exodus International was an ex-gay ministry. So there was this whole movement in the early 2000s, like a pray away the gay movement, and like gay people were buying in. Well, the motherfucker who founded it is divorced and married to a man now. Wow. Yeah, I don't know his name. Though.
If I ever see him in drag con, I'm gonna punch him right in the face.
Punch him in the nose, bro.
Punch him in the nuts. Just Anyway, but he had a session where he was very cryy and apologetic, and there were some people that took it. Some people were like, I don't accept that.
No.
Like, you set off a series of things in my life that I will never recover from.
And there's not a redemption arc for that.
Right. But other people are like, I needed to hear you say that. So thank you.
Right.
He needed to go on the apology. He needed to go on the Confessions Usher apology tour.
Yes, he did.
Right. He needs to go on the Confessions tour, and he didn't do that.
No.
But I do think that I don't know how it happens. I know that I keep trying to go over my life all the time in church.
Yeah.
And I keep trying to think about the friends that I know are out now.
Right.
And I keep thinking, did I ever put them in a situation where I told them something? I
know I did. I can picture specific people in time.
I know this. You're gonna love this one. I didn't do that to gay people, but I did tell a lot of my straight girlfriends to break up with their secular boyfriends. So I know that there is just like a litany of girls that are still single now. It's my fault. Like I was like, he doesn't serve the word.
No, you're unequally yoked, bro.
Yugo desigual. It's Spanish. Yugo desigual. Pray him out. I know the women in my who had wonderful boyfriends.
Yeah.
And here I am happily married to a guy who never stepped foot in the church.
Right.
And so I'm like,
yeah.
That's on me, bro. That's on me.
I can think of specific moments. Like I was as well intentioned as I could have been for the level of informed that I was. But there are moments that I will have trouble forgiving myself for. Like I used to wear a sweatshirt around that said abortion is homicide. I fucking cringe at that now. Like I bought it at Kingdom Bound. I thought it was so cool, and the booth was so punk, and that was just the whole world I grew up in. Yeah, punk rock. But then I had this one friend. It was my junior year. I was in junior English class, and I know the two people still to this day. But my friend was pregnant, and then my other friend was like, so I was wearing that sweatshirt, and she was like, so you're saying that if this friend was needed to have an abortion, right, that she should go to jail for murder? And I was stumped. I'm never speechless, bro. I always have a story. Nothing. Cricket. Yeah, I was like, shoot. And I did not wear that sweatshirt again. And there were just moments like that. And the thing is that I talked with a friend of mine, Jennifer, who was on a couple of weeks ago. She's a trans woman who, for the first 50 years of her life, was a straight white male Southern Baptist pastor. Layers of interesting conversation that we had. And I talked to her right after her first pole dancing class. So great conversation. But we were talking, I know, right? We were talking about the unholy trinity of patriarchy and capitalism and evangelicalism. And all of those things are systems based on an unequal power footing, right? Because like if you are poor, if you are brown, if you are female, if you are secular, right? Like you need something from these organizations. And so our worlds, the power structure of our worlds have oriented themselves around this creating and manufacturing of guilt and deficit in us. And so what would a space look like where that's not the purpose?
I think it was your Facebook for the first time. I think you put up something about sort of all the services that someone wants if they're homeless, but they can't drink, they can't eat, it's criminalized.
Yep.
And I remember reading that and being like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And the justification of, well, you don't spend my money doing that or don't. Yep. And I'm like, but they need help.
They need help.
And so let them drink.
Yeah.
Like, what do you, that, like, just decriminalize all of that.
Yeah,
like,
get rid of it. Like, why?
Stop it. Stop criminalizing. Well, that's because of the criminalization of the poor, right?
Always.
I remember I had read that and I was like, Leo's right. Like, why don't, because I remember having to like drug test, the kids in foster care. And I was like, what are we going to think about foster care? That's the fucking point.
Yeah.
Then why do we rip from their parents away in the first place?
Exactly. Like, what about that? What about that? Why weren't they placed with a family member? And then that family member given the money that the white foster parents were given. Where did that go? Right? When they could have lived with Abuela or Tia.
The endless amounts of like, I do remember there was a case, and this is off topic, but I do remember there's a case of a young woman and the foster parents were very religious. They were, I think they were Seventh-day Adventists. They could have been Jehovah's Witness. Yeah. It was one of the two. And her mom was with another woman. Mm-hmm. And so during the time of foster care, all she heard about was they were going to hell. Mm. And then like going with her and loving her mother very much. And her mom had gotten involved with something, with drugs, Yeah. And just her, but her partner actually was helping her to get sober and was fantastic. Yeah. And the foster parent, and we had to kind of step in. Thank God, again, my scary boss was also not a believer of any kind. And she was like, cut that shit out.
Knock it out.
You can't say that in front of the kid. And it's like, but it's wrong. They're like, well, you can't say that. Like, then we're going to take her out of your house too. But that being such an interesting, also, right, putting them in Christian homes that, very much like what they did to indigenous kids. And,
yes. Oh my God, up until the 60s and 70s, like, white people, bro, white people.
Well, and also if you've not heard, Canada's doing a little bit of a better job with their indigenous folks. Yes. And there's a series of podcasts called Missing and Murdered.
I have listened.
Oh yeah. Well, she's Cree, and she talks so much about the schools and and she does the whole generational curse thing, right? Yes. Christians do it with sin. Yep. Right? They're like, oh, what's your sin? It's like, what about trauma? What about trauma? They're doing it. Yep. What about trauma? That really hasn't, I mean, there's biology around how trauma might carry into the cell.
It rewires your brain for generations out. And if you're going to talk about generational sin, I do not want to hear one more Christian utter the phrase generational sin until you can accept and repent for the perpetuation of systems that keep families in generational poverty.
Right. But no, we're not going to do that.
Done.
Don't forget to tithe.
Don't forget to tithe, right? So that the rich, white, straight, male, evangelical cop that was a pastor can have a better Jeep or a bigger house in his development. Not that that has happened and then that person personally came for me, but maybe I'm speaking from experience.
But maybe. Well, or there's this, for a while there was an Instagram that I followed and I had to stop. And it was a guy who was, I don't know if you heard about it. He was he would take snapshots of pastors preaching and their
preacher sneakers. Yes. Love it.
I love some preacher sneakers because I was like, look at these motherfuckers, those are Yeezys.
That's like, a fucking Gucci belt. That's a Gucci belt. That's a Gucci belt. How much does your congregation
But also for me, like the hipster pastor with the jeans and the loving the hip hop and the get off. Bye. You need to go too.
Not today,
so
Satan.
I'm so out of the loop. I was like, at least my pastors wore polyester suits.
Yeah.
They were uncomfortable up there and they were hot.
Sweating for Jesus.
That's right. And in Pentecostal church, when the handkerchief came out, they sweat. It was when it got good.
Yes,
that's what they used to say.
That's when it was popping. Yeah,
that's what in Puerto Rico they still do. They're like, oh, it's about to get good. He took out his handkerchief. We're going to be here for another 3 hours. As a kid,
I went to church when I went to church in Southern Ohio, same situation, right? So like the Churches of Christ and Christian Union, small, rural, fundamental Bible Belt type church in Southern Ohio, which is kind of where my dad and my Bampa started their ministry. And you knew there was this guy, Brother Troy. And when Brother Troy got on the piano and started improvising, and when this one old lady came up the aisle with her handkerchief just waving, you knew you were in it for 2 more hours. You knew.
Let me tell you, I have a karaoke mic. It's not I have it in my vicinity. And I got it because we were going to do karaoke with my family, and then COVID, so we didn't do it. But I take the mic, and everyone else would take the mic and start singing.
Yeah.
I go to church.
Yeah.
Like it's immediate. I get on the mic and then I start doing it in Spanish. And I'm like, Santo Dios, yo te pido, Padre. And I was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, Padre. It's not, I start to yell. My hand goes up and he's like, or sometimes I put my hand on his head. He's like, what are you doing? And I was like, we're going to have church. I'm going to pray for you. He's like, could you get your sweaty hand over? Like, he has no concept of it, but I am living my 6-year-old kid fantasy, right? Every kid,
you got to.
Kids church fantasy, because it's like this was the thing you did. And so so we were talking,
those were our rock stars, the people doing that.
We were talking about that in a group Zoom with my friends from work, and then one of them said, but did you ever have a runner? And everyone that was a church person lost it, because they all, except for one girl who didn't go to church, and she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. All of us from all different parts of the United States, all people of color, we were like, but did you ever have a runner? And I was like, the aisle had to be clear, because there was a brother who kind of like revved himself up. And my mom would be like, get out of the aisle.
Get out of the way.
Get out of the way. And the only thing I remember is I one time ran after him because it was funny. And my mom yoked the shit out of me. Like, he ran past, and right as I was coming, she just put her arm out. And I was like, whoa! And she was like, get over here. And I was like, man, wait. This is confusing. He is doing it.
Double standard.
He is having the time of his life. You tell me I can't run in church. So we all took out after him. And my mother timed that shit to a science. He ran, another kid, I came, hand out, yoked. I'm like, she's like, sit down. Like my mom was totally in the spirit, called me, sit down. She went right back to Jesus.
You know
and
it.
Like, I'm completely throat punched. I'm
like,
she's like,
still recovering for 20 minutes.
Oh yeah. It's still, my voice still scratched. She's like, you're fine. And to this day, she's like, I did not do that. I'm like, Mom, I remember the throat.
I remember the feeling. I might need a lozenge just thinking about it.
Right. And I was like, and she was like, oh yeah, that's that brother. He used to run. Like, she remembers. So like things like that are still, and we've talked about it. I'm working on a book of sort of vignettes and memoirs, and it's stuff like that, because I think people don't realize. Yeah,
that story, bro. Like, and this, it was funny is like, that was a real experience. Like that was, I'm not Puerto Rican, unfortunately. I'm apparently a Viking, but like those cultural touch points and those moments and those, is it like novelas or like cultural stories, right? That connect you to who you are and your people and where you come from. Like, it is a painful thing to feel like you are a person without a flag, and any community that is going to be a safe space better not make one person feel like that. And I think that's what I love about you as a person, because for me, and I mean, I don't even know if I've told you like all of the ways that you were so formative in my development as a person. But were I not to have met you, were I not to have had the city, were I not to have came of age in a space that was so matriarchal and brown, I would not be me. And so much of that is carried into who I am. And that is what I want to see come forth into the world, that I want to give birth to in some small way if I can. And I think that as long as we major on safe, and we major on working on ourselves, and we major on just doing, like, my favorite axiom is doing what's most loving. Because if it's not loving to yourself, and if it's not loving to others, then get the fuck out of here. Like, I don't know how I feel about sin so much as like that concept, but if you are not doing what is most loving, it is an exercise in taking the world in the wrong direction and missing the point. Right. And so how can we?
And I mean, I think my counter to that is always, I cringe a little with loving.
Yeah.
Because I think loving is about, some people think tough love is love.
Oh yeah.
Tough love is so
I could see that.
my only caveat to that is that even love is open to the interpretation of
Very
the
much so.
person.
Well, yeah,
Right?
and we only
I thought
have,
I was loving you by,
right.
you know, I've heard countless stories of friends of mine who a loved one came out.
Yes.
And the parent was like, I freaked out because I was scared. I was
Yeah.
just so scared. And
Yep.
I know what the world's gonna do to you.
Yeah.
And so I was angry.
Yep.
And the kid's like, well, that felt like you were mad at me, right? But it's still loving them, right?
Yeah.
I think Hannah Gadsby, if you ever watched Hannah Gadsby,
yeah,
she's a comedian, and she talks about that with her mom.
yeah,
That her mom said it, and her mom said, in that moment, I didn't have the words, I just had the fear.
yes.
So it wasn't love. I was operating out of pure fear.
Yeah.
But it becomes love. So that's why I always default to safety.
Yeah,
because I'm
I like that.
If you watch a fire marshal,
right,
safe is safe.
Safe is
if
safe.
the door is hot, touch it.
Yep.
Touch it. If it's hot, don't open it.
Yep.
Like, that's universal, bitch. There's no argument behind that.
Yes.
If there is smoke coming out of the bottom, leave, right?
Bye.
Like, that's how I got to that space, because, like, if you ever watch a fire marshal, I don't. That's why I don't go with the police. I always go with the fire marshal.
No one ever wrote a song called "Fuck the Fireman."
They will tell you what is safe and what is not safe.
Yeah.
They're like, you need to put a barrier there because people will tip over. People will look over and they'll fall.
Yeah, so and I don't care who you are. You just need a barrier.
Right. You know, in buying a house, there was like, it's an old house, and they were like, oh, you need to put a banister. And I was like, oh, so. And then I fell down the stairs. I was like, oh, that's why you need a banister. My clumsy ass just fell down the stairs. Right. And a banister is kind of like a universal precaution.
It is a thing.
And I also love safety because it includes like handicap accessible.
Yeah.
So I feel like if a person aims for safety, it's far more inclusive.
I like that.
Love to me is open to interpretation.
Oh God,
things get dangerous.
Well, I mean, like in the Hebrew language, which I had to read for some godforsaken reason for a degree that I have yet to be able to use. But I mean, there were 7 words for love in the Hebrew language, and we translated it into 1. Like, that alone should be enough to like really shake your idea of biblical inerrancy. Like 7 words condensed into 1 by people who were, you know, in the power structures of the day and had, you know, whatever, just paid to put words in there. Like, whoa, back up. You know what I mean?
Right.
I like
love, and the Greeks, you know, the Greeks have a couple of them, right? Because everyone in church talks about agape.
Oh, they always do.
But the Greeks had it, and it's similar to like Inuit people, right?
Yeah.
Inuit people have a ton of words for snow.
Yeah.
Because it's not just snow.
Right.
There's like the hard, and we know there's like the slushy snow, the hard snow, the ice snow. So if you deal with it, you know there's different versions of it, right?
Yeah.
So the Hebrews dealt with love.
They did.
I don't know that the Crusades did. So I go for safety.
I like safety. I like it. I think, well, and that's another part that I like about conversations. And I'm a verbal processor, so I like 2 people could watch this video and I'm still vibing. You know what I mean? But I think that a lot of what these videos have been doing is like, this to me personally feels like church, but it's like a distilling process, right? It's like, let us get to the purest, you know, like highest proof form of what actually matters, and then champion that and talk about that and work to refine that in intersectional spaces. Like I enjoy that moment, and so I'll certainly take safety with me on my journey, you know.
Yeah, and then my other caveat, because my husband always says, when we go to Target, like if there's like a young person at the I'll read their tag. So if you do, I'd be like, hi, Leo. Like, Leo, is this your full-time job? Are you going to college? You'd be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what did you want to do? Did you want to major? And I was like, here we go. She's youth developer, right? Always developing somebody.
Always.
Like, there's just a conversation to have here, okay?
It's a conversation.
He's like, that doesn't occur to him, right? Ever. But I'm like, I don't look at a sunset and be like, oh, let me get my camera. I was like,
right.
Different strokes, right?
Different minds, yep.
Different strokes. And so my other, if I have a point in youth development, is I love conversations, but I when you're trapped in the world of nonprofit, if you've ever been, you can over design something. Like you can just you can stay in a design phase for a really long time.
Forever.
The next step is just set up something and do it.
Yeah.
Whether you fall face first, whether no one shows up, whatever it is.
Yep.
I think you have to build the thing and then fly it and see how it flies. And if it goes left, then you fix the left. But I think you can have conversations. But like I said to you, the reason that I was open to doing this and the reason I was open to kind of being outed as a heathen. And the reason is because I don't know what I believe in outside of human beings being decent to one another. I don't. Right. But I do know that there is a space where the church is going to continue to shrivel up and die.
Yes.
And the patriarchy is going to continue to shrivel up and die. And it's like the Wild West, where be careful, because someone that has not walked in your shoes and is not big, I got this. Yeah. This is what trans people need. And you're going to be like, shut up, bro. Right? You don't got this.
Yeah, you do not.
You need to listen. So like I said, I don't know if it's a brick and mortar thing or something, a dog and pony show you take on the road where you teach pastors how to do it. But I just think there's fertile ground for healing. Yes. A friend of mine told me this, a trans friend of mine, and I really appreciated him for saying it. He said, I am not a mad guy because I'm trans. Right. I am fallible. Yeah. I'm a person that just in the same way, you married the person that you married and made the choices you made. I made a choice for myself. Right. But I have not ascended into some other form of this is not Pokemon. I am not on the final stage. Yeah, I'm still going. And if you've met a trans person, you've met precisely one trans person, and you've met them at that time in history. And so, he's great at saying, I happen to have some insight on an experience that, although is more public, is still very rare, right? We're still really, you're not going to have 4 kids and one of them is going to be like, it's not like a 1 out of 4 thing. Right. Okay. Yep. So he's like, I understand that I have a responsibility in that corner sector of the world if I choose to, right? If I choose to out myself, and I do. Yep. Right? Which is a privilege thing. Which is a privilege thing, and I appreciate it that I have to out myself, but I am also not like a scribe. Yeah, like I don't have all the answers. Right. So don't come in. And he's like, I also need a place to go where I can feel seen, but I can grow. Yes. And those spaces for me are sometimes hard because I can't be my full self. Right. If I work in education, I have to think about other people. If I have to take on, if I out myself, I have to take on the responsibility of becoming the outed person, right? And I thought about that. And so when I saw you sort of doing this, I was like, what a good opportunity to have a cross-pollinated space where someone who wants to be an ally and be of the faith can learn. Yeah. Someone who's been really hurt can heal. Yeah. And someone who is in it can go to someone that looks like them to learn. Yes, exactly. So, that's why I saw it, and I said it out loud. I said to my husband, I said, look, I don't believe in calling. But if I did, this is a calling. This to me feels like a calling. And I told you this, I think, repeatedly. When I saw that you had come out, when I saw you were trans, I always say this, it made so much sense to me. Yeah. First of all, you're exactly the same. Yeah. It's exactly the same energy, exactly the same. Goofy, the whole 9 yards. Goofy as hell. Goofy all over the place, a little over here, a little over there, all of it. In love with everything, in love with nothing, all of it. It's all there. I love it. Really talented, not quite sure. It's all there. All there. But I had expressed to a friend of mine, it's almost a miracle. It was almost miraculous to see someone really become clearer. Yeah. Yeah. Right? Just become clearer. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that you can do in community that's so beautiful. Yeah. It's like witnessing the butterfly. Yeah. Like I would have loved to have been there. Like I had not met Leo in person. Remember that? Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I always say, I'm gonna grab your face and pull your beard. I'm gonna do all those crazy things like an aunt does. Yeah. Because they're like, oh my God, look at that. But I feel like that to me is sacred. Yeah. That to me is sacred. That's what I want to say. That to me is bearing witness to something. Yeah. And so any space and anyone, if we got 5 people left listening, if you are a hetero, boring old hetero person, but you have no qualms and you are an ally, and you can hold space for someone, that's a gift. That's sacred. That is sacred. That is, for every shaman, there was always like for every for every Chuck D, there's a Flavor Flav. Like I'm Flavor Flav. I am a hype man. I love it. I love being a hype man for the gay community. I love being a hype man. I love it. I love being an ally. And so if anyone is listening to this or whatever, that's what you can do. That and try to build a space that is sacred.
Yeah.
And we're Christian talking about it. I can't imagine where the conversation is among the Muslim community.
Yeah.
I can't imagine where it is among the Hindu community.
Yes.
I can't the Bengali community. I can't imagine where it is among the Buddhist community.
We're working on that. Working on getting that conversation.
I have friends that are Muslim, that are Arabic, that are trans, and so I can't imagine what that looks like for them, right? Interfaith.
Yep.
I know it looks very different in different Jewish communities, Hasidic and Orthodox, and culturally Jewish, and right. So I just think that would, if there's a call to arms, it's if you're going to do this.
Yep.
Again, it's the people that are going to bear witness to this.
Yeah.
Remember, this is it. Remember, because my friend Chad remembers this. If someone passed down the spirit and you had a little blanket to,
put the blanket
modesty,
over. Yep.
The modesty.
Yep.
I'm the modesty person for trans folks. Like I'm the modesty person for gay folks. Like
I love it.
I'm just here.
Yep.
Like,
Flavor Flav.
Whatever little bit of spirit is left over.
Yep. Yep.
So I think that's why. I think that's why I got excited. I thought this is a really good opportunity for someone who's going to be thoughtful about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, my friend, I love you dearly. I have to head out because my bougie children want some sushi for dinner and the place closes in 10 minutes. I have 5 minutes to get there. I have 2 minutes for you to tell me or to tell everybody where they can find you if they want to find you.
Okay, so you tag me. It's Eunice Alicia 9 at Instagram, but you could also look up Hudi Lu, which is HUDIELU, because Hudak is my last name, Lulu is my nickname. So Hudi Lu on Twitter. I don't tweet as much. I'll start tweeting more now. And Hudi Lu _stages for anything that I'm sort of doing.
Okay.
And you can contact me through Instagram, and you tag me on Facebook. But look out for. I have a story coming up in an anthology. I'll send you the link.
Yeah.
It's going to be published January 12th with Kevin Powell and Gloria Steinem and Nikki Giovanni and a bunch of really cool cats.
Dope.
And my TEDx is up.
It's on the page. It is there. It exists.
And my husband's video, America Rise, is also part of Hudi Lu Productions. Just look that up. It's a great video.
It's amazing. All right.
And anything else you need, just give me a call. If anyone wants to send me hate mail, please.
Send all the hate mail. The more hate mail, the better.
That's the stuff. I have yet to get a hate mail comment. I am living.
I could work for that. So I thank you so much, friend. I love you.
My love to all of your people as well.
You are a beautiful, stunning person, and you too are clearer in the way that you mentioned me being clearer. I look forward to talking to you in the future. You have a great night, friend.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been the Conversations Podcast. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions or comments, or just want to get involved, feel free to join the conversation on social media. You can find us at Conversations Official on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And please don't forget to rate, follow, and share this podcast. We're available on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Does it? She still fully thinks that it's an answering machine.
Yeah, pick up.
The message is Lulu, pick up, Nina. But now she learned texting, so it's a lot of deciphering. She sends my husband text in Spanglish, Spanglish. So like she sounded out words.
Yep.
And my husband like, what does that mean? What did she say? I had to like read it through a few times.
Yeah, like hooked on phonics. Oh my goodness. Abuela's first language is Spanish, as was Elle's. Elle's first language was Spanish until she went to school here, right? And learned, you know what I mean, learned English. But her mom's text, man, she still uses Spanish like sentence structures. And then this, I think her autocorrect is just fucking confused at this point, right? And so you don't we read them out loud and we're like, what is she actually saying?
You have to kind of fill in the blank context clues.
Yeah.
You gotta the other day one of my sisters is buying a condo in Puerto Rico. This is a great story. And she's been trying to close because COVID, she doesn't want to go in person.
Right.
And then her husband got a text from the guy. Her husband, although mom was Puerto Rican, he doesn't speak Spanish.
Okay.
And the syntax was a little off. And he was like, I asked for your sorry. And he told now he says it to my sister loses her shit.
Right.
Proceeds to call the rest of the sisters. We're all laughing. He's like, because in Spanish it's te pido tu perdón. Right? So in Spanish you say, I ask for your sorry. But he just directly translated.
I got you.
It was such an ESL, like,
yes.
And we all loved it. So we continue to say to each other,
of course,
I ask for your sorry.
I ask for your sorry.
Her husband's like, is it my husband's like, is it Yoda? I was like, no, it's because of the way the sentence is structured. And then one of my other sisters is a Spanish teacher in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Okay.
With very wealthy white children that don't speak. Some of them speak good Spanish because they had nannies.
All right. And
then some of them don't.
I love it.
There is a lot of bad Spanish.
Oh yeah.
Her favorite being SES. People use it as is, and it's not. So they're like, yo es trabajo. And she's like, that's incorrect. It's completely wrong. And then they smile. She's like, sit down. It's just
this
wrong.
Is awful. We're done.
Right. Yeah. This is incorrect. You said you are work.
Right.
And so she'll talk to us that way. She'll call us and she'll say something and we'll get it, but she'll just rip something apart. She's like, this is what my students would say. Yo es trabajar. She's like, no, that's still wrong. You're conjugating everything wrong.
Still wrong.
And they're so proud of themselves. And she's like, sit down.
Yeah, you just stop.
It fascinates us that people don't speak Spanish.
Right.
Because I think I hear so much. I hear so often. Growing up near the Bronx. So it still fascinates me. Like in Pennsylvania, when I say something in Spanish and John, because like I'm sure you're at the stage where you understand. You get the gist.
Yep, I've got it at this point. I've got it at this point.
You get the gist of something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he'll get the gist of what I'm saying. Yeah,
right.
He'll get the gist of what I'm saying. He won't get the gist of what I'm saying.
It's too funny, man.
That's all exciting. But go ahead. You need to go.
So Spanglish. So I kind of. I know. Well, listen, like, here's the thing. This is why we go for an hour and a half, because like 9 times out of 10, I'm talking to people because I really enjoy them, right? Like that's what's happening right now. And so I find it requisite for us to have some time to chat. You know what I mean? So I want to, if you're watching now, I started the recording way back before the answering machine story, because I had to. It's one of my favorite stories that I've ever heard you tell.